Bring Them Home tells the story of a small group of Blackfoot people and their mission to establish the first wild buffalo herd on their ancestral territory, since the species near extinction a century ago. An act that would restore the land, re-enliven traditional culture, and bring much needed healing to their community. Narrated by Academy Award nominated Blackfeet Nez Perce actor Lily Gladstone and co directed by Blackfeet siblings Ivan and Ivy McDonald with Daniel Glick. Ivan and Daniel joined me over Zoom in July to talk about the making of the documentary. Bring Them Home will be screened at the Wachholz College Center on August 29th, beginning at 6 p.m. Tickets can be purchased through the Wachholz College Center website. In addition to the showing of the film, there will be a performance from native rapper Superman, as well as a discussion about missing and murdered Indigenous people with filmmakers and Nick McKinley, founder of Deliver Fund, a counter-human trafficking intelligence and technology nonprofit. To learn more about Bring Them Home, visit www.thunderheartfilms.com. The reintroduction of bison on the Blackfeet Reservation is a really special moment, and I'm just wondering when the decision was made to put it on film like this and make a film about it.
So I started the project with two or three other people. Our producer Sarah and one of our directors of photography Zane and my wife was really helpful and the sound guy named Coulter in those first years. But it came out of a Buffalo Drive that we shot these short films that we made on a Buffalo Drive in 2016, where it was just an excuse for me to spend time with bison. That was the initiative. Like I just wanted to be close to that animal. And then I happened to have connections to Blackfeet people at that time and they were like, "Yeah, come on, let's do it." And in the process of making that short film, one of the characters in that, the head of the manager of the bison herd told us about this plan, this vision, dream to establish wild bison again on the reservation. And I thought, oh wow, that could be a really cool story. And nobody else was working on it, nobody else was telling it. I so the small group of us who were part of the team said, okay, let's do it. We didn't have any money, didn't have any funding. We just like mostly volunteering for the first few years, always looking for Blackfeet collaborators. And then finally through our DP Zane found Ivan and Ivy, and it was like a perfect fit because they're tribal members, they're from the reservation. And yeah, I mean, we thought that first year in 2016, they said, yeah, we're gonna probably release them next year. And then next year came and they're like, oh, we're probably gonna release them next year. Seems like next year. And so it kept going and going. And so it was like a 7 or 8 year process to kind of stick with the story. But yeah, Ivan and Ivy came in halfway and it was pretty critical to have them. And I don't know if you have anything you want to add, Ivan, about kind of why you wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, it was a really interesting like meeting of all of these different kind of threads. Like Ivy and I had been working with Zane. I actually, when I was working at the University of Montana, his mom was kind of my supervisor, and she's like, "Oh, my son does films too and stuff like that." When you hear that from a lot of people, you're like, "Oh yeah, no, that's cute." Like I'm sure that I like looked him up. I was like, "Oh yeah," I was like, "This guy's legit." And so he was like our first cinematographer for our other Sundance supported project, which will be on PBS upon completion. Um and of course, like our cousin Alia, who's appears in both of the shorts that Daniel was mentioning. So there was all of these kind of coalescing things. And then Lily, we had ran into Lily somewhere in Missoula when she was still living in there, and had that was right after I think we attached to the project, so maybe late 2020. Um, and she was just super excited. She was super excited about the projects, and so yeah, just it kind of all happens. And of course, born and raised in Browning, lived there for probably the first half or at least third of my life and go back all the time. Since I moved back to Montana about 10 years ago. And yeah, it was just this amazing opportunity to tell this super important story. I think when we originally were agreed to be a part of the story, I was like, it's such this cool opportunity to tell this very micro level story of this community, this small place in Montana that, the work being done here has these larger macro kind of implications and conservation and land stewardship and climate and all of those kind of things. So it was just kind of super excited to, be attached. And, it was really, Daniel had a really clear vision when they first kind of pitched the project to us. I was like, okay, I could see this being done because I feel Daniel was so passionate about it and was, kind of the steward, and was really super um, Ivy and I and Sarah and all the other team always talk about, as intense as Daniel can be at times, none of these projects would have been completed if it wasn't for his incredible work ethic. So yeah, just being a part of it was, a really big honor.
I
Yeah.
didn't know,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Daniel.
you talked about me behind my back like that, Ivan, but that's cool.
Sometimes you need someone who's a little intense, to
Yeah,
get
no,
stuff
he keeps the ship going. That's why Ivy and I always say, he keeps the ship going and always keeps us on course. And that's what you need in these projects, these high level projects like this. I'm learning because it's really important.
Yeah. So growing up in Browning, can you kind of tell me what you were taught about bison growing up there?
Yeah. I think growing up we had always learned that. I mean, Ivy and I had I don't know if you call it a luxury, but privilege of growing up pretty culturally connected. Like our parents did ceremonies growing up, and my parents would put up an okan, which is kind of the Blackfeet version of a Sundance or what. And so, yeah, we grew up really understanding that, the creator created us and then created bison shortly after. So we'd have something to sustain us and feed us and provide shelter and tools and clothes and all of that. And so grew up really culturally understanding of bison, even if they weren't really like a parent on the reservation. Like I was telling Ivy, I was like, I remember like the first time I even had seen anything real about a bison was a bison skull after our parents did a ceremony, because that's part of what you use. That's kind of the last leftover thing from these ceremonies is like a bison skull. And its hide is used to put up the altar and the lodge and the Okan structure. And so we kind of knew that bison were incredibly important for us and our people and our community. And had kind of, but again, they weren't something just readily apparent that was on the reservation. There was like these small kind of pockets of them here and there, but it wasn't really like a sort of what the film shows. It wasn't really like a, a huge thing for the tribe at the moment. And I don't think people really understood or really, because I remember when we used to get like bison for ceremonies, it would always be in Yellowstone or something like that, or some rancher near the reservation would provide them. Knowing that their importance was there, but not necessarily being maybe physically connected to them. And so that came on a lot later and was even really heightened through working on this project.
So as you've gotten older and seen bison kind of return more to the landscape, I know this reintroduction project is new, but how does it feel to have them closer and know that kids that are learning about them in school now will be able to see them more in a natural way?
I do work with like the Cutswood, which is the Blackfeet language school, which I attended when I lived in Browning. And so, they do a lot of like bison awareness and bison education. And actually, a short we did with them a year and a half ago, it was all about kind of bison and the importance of bison. But on the flip side, seeing them being reintroduced on this larger scale, it's offered opportunities for reconnection in other ways, like Any Days, which Any is the Blackfeet word for bison. Any Days is this incredible yearly celebration that's all bison centered, and it takes place on the reservation, and it's kind of this huge event. So seeing these kids who might have the spiritual cultural connection like Ivy and I did, but not the physical connection. And that the fact that they have the physical connection now where you can see bison roaming the reservation, there's opportunities to engage with them, to see harvests, to see, to participate in reenactments. I think it's incredibly important for kind of the future generations, but even just like the future of our people. Like when we interviewed even some of the elders, they talked about how incredible it was to see, the kids involved at Indie Days, or, to see this large scale bison reintroduction, because a lot of their elders and even their grandparents and great grandparents talked about, we may never see bison again on the reservation. So, 100 years later, it's a incredible thing to witness.
So as you guys got into filmmaking, what were some of the elements about this situation in general that you knew that you wanted to capture in the film?
I mean, I think within the first 2 years, we had figured out kind of the main elements that would be in it. Like we didn't know anything when we started filming. Like it was like, okay, there's this mission to put the buffalo out there. We didn't really know any of the players. We didn't know anything except that there was this dream. And I mean, we knew like one person, and we started there. But so it was an exploration. But in the first like couple of years, we kind of identified four pieces that felt important. Um, and and that was the teachings of Dr. Leroy Littlebear, who's a Canadian. He's part of the Blackfoot Confederacy in Canada, and where part of our story is, and the way that he's able to contextualize the importance of bison is like very easy for someone who doesn't come from the Blackfeet tradition to understand. And it's just we did this one interview with him in like 2018, and it was just like it was just mind blowing. It was an incredible experience just interviewing him and really, okay, this has to be a big piece of it. And then there were we knew that the stories of Paulette Fox, who's also from Canada, and Irvin Carlson, who's the head of the Blackfeet Buffalo program, they needed to be in it because they were two of the people who were there like from the beginning and who were like just stayed with it until the present. And so we knew that there was that, and that we also wanted as much as we could to capture the experience of being with the buffalo, like what's called like verite filming, where you're like on the ground capturing action as it happens. And there's not like that's not the whole film. It's this blend of interview and verite and narration, and but we knew we wanted to try to capture the visceral sense of like what it's like to be close to those animals. And because if you see them, if you're around them, it's hard not to love them. It's hard not to like appreciate them, like their power, how how ancient they feel. And then the nice thing about buffalo filming buffalo is that they really like looking at you. And so we just have hours and hours of footage of buffalo, like raw footage of buffalo staring into the camera lens. And that if you stare into their eyes long enough too, it's like staring into the eyes of another human being. It's hard not to feel something for them. So those were the pieces that early on we identified. um, but it was pretty hard to figure out how to weave them together. That took a long time.
It was a really kind of evolving process. Like I remember like maybe the second year we kind of at that point I think you could correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, like we had thought we had all the footage. We're like, oh, the final release might not happen, it's this kind of thing that's been pushed back, and then I think it was maybe Irvin or someone was like, well, we're going to release them soon, and then it was kind of like I wouldn't say out of nowhere, but it was just kind of like I remember Daniel, Ivy, and I were all scheduled to be somewhere else, so none of us even got to see that first release in person, just because of kind of like the tenuous scheduling and how kind of sometimes things can work on the reservation. And so yeah, the story kind of really, I think, switched into the best version of it. The fact that we're able to get kind of that first release, and again, that's kind of the thing with, I think, the documentary in particular. It's you could have one story kind of following your original idea and then have some whole different thing happen where you're like, oh, gotta go plan B, gotta go plan C. Sometimes you even get to plan E or F, and so I think that was but I think and you could correct me if I'm wrong again, Daniel, your original vision was always to kind of get that first release or that release. And so we, after the reality of it kind of came to us, we're like, oh, we have to get this because this is the perfect kind of, not even really ending, but it's kind of this beginning for this whole story. And so when we were able to capture that and it's interwoven beautifully within the film, yeah, it was just kind of that. It was really interesting to kind of see the different trajectory. And even now the tribe is rooting and shooting for a even wider release of the majority of the animals, if I remember correctly. And so It's going to be this work in progress that, fingers crossed that it's enough time where I can get up there and see actually one of the releases. But yeah, I think throughout the story, it was just kind of following the winds of change, I guess, to get to the best story.
Was that the biggest challenge, just waiting for when that initial release was going to happen, or what were some of the challenges you guys encountered in general?
I think like the biggest challenge was patience, um, because there was just so much uncertainty about when this would happen, if it would happen, like when, or really when anything would happen. Like there was always uncertainty of like, oh, well, maybe we're gonna do the Buffalo Drive these 3 weeks, sometime in these 3 weeks. And then like we wouldn't know until like 2 days before, like for sure, or even like a couple hours before, if for sure something was gonna happen. And that was just because that's kind of the nature of things, at least on the Blackfeet reservation. And that was a process of like me coming from the white world. I'm not Blackfeet. I feel grateful, so grateful that the door was open for me and that I could team up with Ivan and Ivy. And but I'm coming from the world of like, okay, let's schedule this out. Let's get da. But being up there, like one of the first experiences I had was filming this Buffalo Drive, one of the Buffalo Drives. And I said, there was 3 days, and on day two, I was like, okay, so when are we going to start tomorrow? He was like, the guy leading the drive was like, I don't know, set 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there. And then it happened, and then it started at 2. And so it was like, it was getting used to a different sense of time and learning to relax and trust and have faith and accept this reality of Indian time, which is something that that Lily, our narrator, says in the film of things are going to happen when they're meant to happen. And so that was maybe the biggest challenge, was uh, learning to accept that we couldn't control anything, and we just had to surrender to uncertainty.
Could you guys run through how Lily got involved?
Yeah, so yeah, I knew Lily through, I think, her cousins originally, because she grew up on the Blackfeet reservation. And before I even filmed those these Buffalo short films, I had reached out to her about maybe playing a role in these short films. And so this was long before Killers of the Flower Moon. And we stayed in touch, and like she was really helpful, and we shared footage of the early stuff with her. And this within, like, I think within 6 months of starting this film, I asked her if she would narrate it. And she said yeah. And I think she had a big heart for this from the very beginning. And then when Ivan and Ivy joined up, that like even bolstered her interest more, because Blackfeet directors as well as me, and she knew them. She had known at least Ivy from school. So there was this long connection. And Lily, as her star like ascended into the heavens, she stayed the same. Like she stayed as kind and generous as she always was. So she wasn't like, oh, now I'm hanging out with Leo and Marty, so go away. No, nothing didn't change. She was like, yeah, let's do it. And like, I'll do anything. Like we did twice. We recorded narration twice with her. If we had to do it 5 more times, God forbid, she would still say yes. I'm sure of that, because she's got a heart for the bison, got a heart for her community. And yes, so we got lucky, very lucky with the timing of her Oscar nomination.
I even remember like one of the earlier sessions where she's like, "Well, I have this big audition, and I'll keep you guys posted if I get it." And then, yeah, had told our team about the Killers of the Flower Moon stuff like a few months before it was announced. And yeah, just like I think that's what's really great about Lily, even with her ascendancy. She's always shouting people out and shouting out Ivy and I, and she just really feels that. Um, how did she phrase it in her interview? Something about like the door's open now, and I want to hold it open for people to follow through as long as I can. So yeah, I think having that and just like that, like such like her really invested invested interest and invested um, time she put into the projects really show.
So I just got one more question for you guys. I really want to ask like 20 more. So what are you hoping people take from the film when they see it?
The main takeaway is that I hope people understand that there's this like small little community, you know, who's always considered like might be considered historically disadvantaged or marginalized or whatnot, but you know, the small community who's trying to make this really grand, important change and change in, you know, the ways in which we humans exist with nature and, you know, interact with nature, and, you know, the tribe having so much of this understanding that kind of the greater good that this tribe is trying to do that doesn't only just benefit them but benefits everyone. And so I kind of hope that people understand that that takeaway is, yeah, you know, kind of this um, takeaway of hope. You know, there is this hope for you know, humans, you know, humans in the world and how we see the world and how we navigate the world and how we interact with the world and, you know, the natural world around us. And so I hope that's the biggest takeaway for people who watch the film.
Mine overlaps with Ivan, and I've said this a bunch of times in different interviews, but like for me, like my hope for the greatest like takeaway is a recognition or a remembrance that human beings are not the top of the like are not the top of the pyramid. Like we should not place ourselves at the top of the pyramid of life. Like we shouldn't even think of life in that way. Like we should think of ourselves as a piece of everything, a part of everything, and to honor and respect everything else in on our planet. Because not only does it help them, but it helps us. It ensures our survival if we give respect to everything else that kind of lives and breathes, and even the things that don't live and breathe, like air and water. And so I think that for me is the biggest thing is I hope people take away like a sense of respect for life, for the life systems that sustain us. Yeah.